et nüüd on mul hea meel kutsuda siia meie ette Põhja-Norra Laste, noorte ja perede direktoraadi peadirektor härra Pål Christian Bergström, kellest ka siin oli juttu ühes avakõnes, et tema on siis härra, kes on ka tegelikult väga palju sisendit, infot ja nõuandeid meile juba selle programmi raames andnud ja loodetavasti teeb seda ka edaspidi. So please, Pål Christian, the floor is yours.
So we have plenty of time.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay. 15 more minutes.
On veel, et Pål Christianile on võimalik esitada ka küsimusi publikul, et pärast tema ettekannet siis on teil võimalus küsida mõned küsimused, nii et mõelge ka selle nurga alt juba.
Peame natuke vabandama, et on mingid tehnilised probleemid. Et ei taha avaneda ettekanne.
I have it on the iPad, so I could email it, if that would help, if you don't have it.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
So.
Okay. So thank you very much, dear colleagues, partners and friends. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation. It's always a great pleasure to be here. And I would also like to use the opportunity to congratulate you on the launch of a very important and also good program, Children and Youth at Risk with a great potential. I will go through the situation for children and youth at risk in Norway. I will say something about the structures working with reducing the risks of children and youth, and also some new initiatives and new ideas connected to what the ambassador mentioned. We have a new Child Welfare Act in the making. It will, as we expect, be adopted on June 10th in the Parliament in Norway. So, the situation for children and youth at risk in Norway, and this will be a broad perspective, and I will focus mainly on child welfare services, and I will explain why. So, we have 5 million inhabitants spread over a large territory. In extent, it is larger than the United Kingdom. We have 428 municipalities. That means that many of them, most of them, are rather small. It's a huge variety in population density in the municipalities in Norway. On average, there are 5,000 inhabitants. And this points to one of the main challenges we have to provide adequate, equal services to children and youth at risk in all municipalities in Norway, given the variations. The child population in Norway is 1.1 million. That equals 22% of the total population. 13% of all children are either immigrants or Norwegian-born children of immigrant parents. 75% of all children in Norway live with both parents. What we recently are addressing in Norway as a huge problem is parents separating and children experiencing damage in high conflict cases between the parents where they don't manage to cooperate on upbringing and taking care of their children in a good collaboration. As you can see, nearly all children, up to 90% of children between 1 and 5 years old is attending kindergartens. And this really points to the necessity to address this arena. And this is a highly policy level focus area in these days in Norway. How can we address children in kindergartens to secure prevention measures, to detect problems, risk factors, and intervene in an adequate way? According to the UN Human Development Index, Norway is one of the safest and best places in the world to grow up. But that does not mean that we don't have challenges, and the ambassador mentioned some of them. We have an extended child welfare system in Norway. We have a ministry dedicated with the responsibility for children and youth at risk. It's the Ministry for Children, Equality and Social Inclusion. We have a separate Child Welfare Act to be renewed in just a few days with an extended responsibility on local and regional child welfare authorities, both for prevention, in-family and out-of-home placement, assistance and reintegration. As of now, and this number have increased a lot over the last 2 or 3 years, there are nearly 10,000 employees working in local or state regional child welfare services. This means that a vast majority of children and youth at risk, they will be covered by child welfare services, either directly as a service provider or in a coordinative role towards bordering services. And this is also really important and emphasized in the new Child Welfare Act, the need to coordinate our efforts in a better way. The purpose of the Child Welfare Act, the current act, is to ensure that children and young people living in conditions which may be detrimental to their health and development receive the necessary assistance and care at the right time. And this particular concept, the right time, is addressed in the new Child Welfare Act. To help ensure that children and young people are brought up in a secure environment. And the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which was adopted also in Norway in 1991, as in Estonia, it was recognized as fully integrated and adopted in Norwegian law by certain changes in legislation in 2003. The structure in our system, child welfare system, is on service level a two-level system. We have, it is divided in local government child welfare services and regional services called Bufetat. There are 5 regional unities working with specialized child welfare services. And we have a supervision system conducted by the county governor, supervising some of child welfare services provided, but not all. But this will be extended in the new Child Welfare Act. These are some basic principles permitting all child welfare services in Norway, both on local and specialized level, based upon the Child Welfare Act and regulations following the Act. Early interventions should be the goal. Provision of effective interventions. We will talk more about effective interventions in the workshop later on today. What do we mean by effective interventions in child welfare? And what kind of specific programs do we use in Norway? And what do we know about the effect of certain programs? The parent's ability to provide adequate care should be reinforced. This is a very strong principle and have led to a lot of parent positive parenting programs introduced, implemented and evaluated in Norwegian child welfare services. The biological principle, the bond between the children and its parents, should be put into consideration. This is addressed in the new Child Welfare Act. All measures should be applied and tried out before out-of-home placement. We should strive to find a proper foster home within the child's own family and network, and to secure the child's involvement in the process according to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. These are important principles which have guided a lot of service development in Norway over the last 10-15 years. Coordination of services is also highly important. Different services are involved in cooperation to ensure that children receive adequate care. And we heard the local municipality union, KS, talk about coordination of services on local level. In more of 80% of all municipalities, there exists formal cooperation structures and coordinative structures between different services: child welfare, public health, mental health services, and school health services. Special attention has been given to local crime prevention programs to try to prevent youth entering into negative environments, groups, and ending up in conflict with the law. One particular program concept for this is called SLT, and you can hear more about that in one of the workshops later on. We have several national strategies for integration of services on local level. You have heard presentations about those in previous conferences and seminars in this cooperation between Norway and Estonia: the municipality model project, the Familiehuset, and the Barnehuset, the children's house. But even though most children in Norway enjoy a safe and secure life in a wealthy country, there are still children and youth at risk, and we have certain challenges. Last year, approximately 52,000 children and youth received assistance from child welfare services on local level, and some of them also on state regional level. This was an annual increase of 7%, which is rather worrisome in some aspects, but also might indicate that assistance is receiving children that need interventions. About 80% of those children received assistance in their home, and this is both a professional and policy wanted development in turn of use of interventions in child welfare cases in Norway. Out of those children placed out of their own home by a care order, 9 out of 10 children are placed in a foster home. That means that we have reduced the number of children, the percentage of children placed in institutions dramatically, I would say, over the last 10 years in Norway, and increased the use of foster homes and differentiated foster homes over the same period. We have, according to the EU's low-income definition, approximately 100,000 children living in low-income families. That is of 2010 in Norway. Overrepresentation in families with immigrant background, single parents, and people receiving social assistance. Common to this group is that they have little or no relation to employment and no completed upper secondary education. And this is a circle, this is a social heritage brought on to children from their parents. Nearly 55,000 penalties among young offenders under the age of 25. By the Child Welfare Act in Norway, child welfare services have an extended responsibility for children and youth in conflict with the law. So the majority of children conducting serious crimes are taken care of by child welfare services and not correctional services or the juvenile justice system in Norway. There are at any time not more than between 5 or 10 youth in prison in Norway, while we have several hundred youth in conflict with the law in rehabilitation programs in child welfare institutions. Mental health problems. There are between 15 and 20% of children and youth with mental health problems to a degree that it affects their functioning on a daily basis in one way or another. Kindergarten, school, peers, parent relations, and so forth. We have a very recent investigation in Norway done by the Public Health Institute as of 2013, saying that 3.5% of the child population in Norway have serious behavioral problems on a diagnosed level and is in need of treatment. When we look at children and youth residing in child welfare institutions, near 70% of that population have experienced serious trauma in their recent history that might have damaged their ability to relate to other adults or peers. This addresses the direction for competence building in child welfare services, and where we need to put our attention and build competence and assessment tools to meet these children's needs, both in family, in foster homes, and in institutions. According to some of the important supervisors, monitors of development of child welfare services in Norway, we have some specific challenges. The Ombudsman for Children in Norway specifically addresses that we have still children in prison in Norway. On an annual basis, between 70 and 100 youth are imprisoned. They are pointing to the child's right to be heard. We have not integrated this in a proper way in all parts of our services for all age groups of children. And we have challenges meeting the needs of children with multicultural backgrounds, especially in our capital, the Oslo area. The UN Children's Committee is pointing to the fact that young single asylum seekers coming to Norway are divided into two groups. The youngest asylum seekers, usually they are from 11, 12 up to 15, are taken care of and covered by the Child Welfare Act, and accordingly child welfare services. But the oldest asylum seekers between the age of 15 and 17 are not covered by the Child Welfare Act or met by the same services or standards as other children in Norway under the age of 18. The National Audit Office is in a national audit of 2012 pointing to the quality in local child welfare services, both on assessment and effective interventions, the variety in municipalities, especially small municipalities with maybe 1 or 2 child welfare workers, it is difficult to sustain quality and competence in those most rural areas. The coordination of services, and they have especially pointed to lack of coordinative actions between schools and child welfare services on a regional level, Bufetat. Children living in institutions not receiving the educational services they have a right to according to the law. The county governor's supervision of child welfare services last year points to the acute crisis interventions in municipalities and the quality for the decision making, placing a child away from its biological or local community. The quality of those assessments is not in all cases secured, proper, and children's rights are at risk. And also to the foster care supervision system. We have a lot of children placed in foster homes, but we fail to supervise the conditions, living conditions for those children in nearly half of the foster homes. This is a huge challenge and also addressed in the new Child Welfare Act. So I will go over to point to the future, the child welfare of the future in Norway. What will it look like? And there has been a lot of evaluations and expert committees and reports made as a decision-making background for the new Act. And one of them is based upon the 2004 child welfare reform in Norway, and ownership reform, removing the responsibility for specialized services in child welfare from the counties to a state regional level, and establishing a new directorate for children, youth and family affairs. In this reform, 26 consultation teams were placed throughout the nation to consult local government and local child welfare services in complex cases to help improve quality in assessments and selection of interventions in those cases. The basis for the reform was a huge variety in services on specialized level, both on capacity and quality. We had an increase in use of institutions in Norway. We had few evidence-based interventions, many expensive, low treatment effect cases in child welfare, and assessment deficiencies. So a recognition was made in 2003. It's difficult to provide equal and high quality services throughout our country, particularly without a centralized unit to coordinate and empower practices. I will get back to this because this reform reinforced the vertical and set a lot of things in motion, both on structure and competence building on a regional level. But this reform has been evaluated, and the evaluators are pointing to some effects, objectives not met with this reform. It was underfunded according to the objectives. We have had a successful turn in use of intervention, and this is the direction, turning away from institutions to place more children in foster homes or provide adequate in-family assistance. We have improved quality, and the use of evidence-based interventions have moderately improved after 2004. We have not differentiated the services enough to meet children's need if we are able to assess those needs in a proper way. This is also a challenge. The cooperation with the municipalities and child welfare services have improved, but there are still challenges. I think this is recognized by all parties. Responsibilities between state and municipal level still have grey zones and need to be clarified. This is addressed in the Child Welfare Act. Municipal level lacks resources. There are case overloads on child welfare workers. There are not enough access or equality in provision of effective in-family services, and they are also pointing to the use of the acute crisis paragraph. It's a rather radical intervention in a family, and the basis need to be quality assured. Cooperation with bordering services have moderately improved, and the cooperation with mental health services is the best example of what we have achieved after this reform. Listening to the voices of the children, this has improved after the reform, and we are addressing this in a more systematic, broad way than we have before, launching user strategies and involving children in policy making and development of services. But the main conclusion is that the reform did not address standards for quality of services or systematic increase in use of effective interventions on local level. This is a recognition after reform in 2004 and goes directly into the new Child Welfare Act. Some of the recommendations after this evaluation in 2004 were to keep a two-level model in child welfare. A reinforced local child welfare service, but also a specialized regional level of child welfare services. But clarify the distinction of responsibilities between those two organizations. Resources and competence building must increase in the municipalities. Further specialization and differentiation of state regional services need to be done to meet children's needs in a proper way, both in institutions and in differentiated foster homes. Norway should establish a national directorate with responsibility for professional development in both regional level and local child welfare level. It was a strong recommendation. There should be done some adjustment of funding structures, making it more expensive for municipalities to take use of institutions. As an incentive for develop in-family assistance and alternative placement out of the family than institutions. So this led to the government's Child Welfare Promise, which was launched in 2010. It consists of three different topics: increased resources into child welfare services in Norway. It's a new law proposition, and change in priorities. Increase in resources in child welfare in Norway in recent years. The blue columns here are positions in municipal child welfare services. And as you can see, there has been a huge increase in positions over the last 2 and 3 years at local level in Norway. 850 new positions over a 3-year period over the state budget earmarked to child welfare workers. The proposition for a new Child Welfare Act. The main contents of this is empowerment of municipal child welfare services, and emphasizing the responsibility the municipalities have by law for all actions taken in the family and in family assistance. Developing the directorate for Bufetat to a professional directorate covering both levels, both municipal child welfare and state regional child welfare. This is taken into the proposition. The proposition also emphasizes the interaction between state and the municipalities and propose new cooperation structures between the municipalities and Bufetat to improve interaction both in complex cases but also in competence building and development of professional services. There are some new economical incentives, increasing the amount the municipalities have to pay to place a child or a youth in an institution, to secure professional and economical incentives in the same direction. We should also continue to differentiate and specialized institution on regional level. Two important principles are underlined in the new Child Welfare Act. It's to downplay the role of the biological principle and introduce the principle of support to positive development. This should be the main emphasis and concern in child welfare cases when you make decisions what kind of interventions you apply into the family and based upon the needs of the child. And also the principle of children's involvement is emphasized in the new Child Welfare Act and some measures taken to secure that children are made more active in their own lives and in the development, positive development of their own future. So I will end this presentation of children and youth at risk in Norway and the future child welfare services with the star of quality. This was introduced in state regional services in 2011. Underlying all development, structural, organizational, professional, competence building on state, regional level. This is taken into the new Child Welfare Act, and a new directorate, if the act is adopted on June 10th, this quality star for child welfare services in Norway will apply all child welfare services, both on local and regional level. So, thank you very much, and good luck with the program in Estonia.
So, thank you very much. Please stay. Pål Christian, sorry, but we have a time to questions now. Maybe you enjoy again. Pål Christian, please. So we have plenty of time for questions now. Maybe. Okay. Nii, nüüd on meil, on kuulda, ei, nüüd on. Et meil on nüüd küsimuste aeg, et nagu kui päevakava vaadata, siis on meil aega küll ja küll. Et olge julged ja palun esitage Pål Christianile küsimusi. Et tema on ekspert, kes oskab vastata, kuidas Norras siis riskilaste ja noorte süsteem käib, kuidas toimub suhtlemine riigi kohaliku omavalitsuste vahel, mis roll on sellel regionaaltasandil, millised meetodeid kasutatakse ja nii edasi, et selline tugev ekspert on meil siin ees ja kasutage julgelt siis võimalust, palun, et meil on mikrofonid siin jagada, jah?
Mis keeles ma räägin?
Eesti keelt.
Okay. Aitäh teile hea ettekande eest. Thank you very much. Minu nimi on Merle Haru ja Inimõiguste Instituudist. Ja minul on teile selline küsimus, vaadates teie suurt tööd ja pikaajalist kogemust, kuidas te näete spetsialistide, koolitust, õpetajad, sotsiaaltöötajad ja samamoodi ka noorsootöötajad. Milline on nende tase selleks tööks, millest te praegu meile rääkisite, mis jääb puudu, mida on tehtud, kui palju veel vaja teha on ja samal ajal ka seda, et kuidas need reformid kajastuvad just nimelt nende spetsialistide formaal- ja mitteformaalses hariduses. Mis te arvate? Aitäh!
That's a huge question, but what we are addressing in Norway in education, basic education and in-service education for child welfare workers, I will start there, is especially attending assessment tools. Have the competence to use assessment tools and conduct an investigation in a child welfare case in a high quality fashion. To be able to make a decision whether you should place the child out of the family or if the potential for provision of positive support to development for the child is at hand for the parents. This really needs high level competence building on the use of assessment tools and investigative measures in child welfare cases. This is one of the areas where we are looking at basic education training for child welfare workers. Also, one of the main challenges is to increase the use of effective interventions in the family. That means knowledge about what are the children's needs, what would be the most effective intervention in the family, either through a parenting positive parenting program or other measures, assistance to the family or working with the child in the family. You should have knowledge of effective interventions. More than that, you must have knowledge of where to turn to release that kind of services in the family at a local level in child welfare workers. So this would be some of the competence areas where we are addressing in further development of competence in child welfare service.
How the reforms are covered?
Mm-hmm. How the reforms are covered? What do you mean by that?
So you said that you have a report, and that's the evaluation of 2011. How you see the nowadays needs and also the coverage of the education, formal and non-formal education for those specialists.
I'm not sure that I get your question properly.
Ma ütlen eesti keeles. Küsimus on selles, et kuidas Norras ülikoolid, erinevad haridusasutused, kes valmistavad ette neid spetsialiste, kuidas on korraldatud, kuidas on koostöö nende institutsioonidega, kes siis koostavad lastele neid erinevad programme, millest me siin rääkisite, ja samamoodi ka neid seadusandlikke muudatusi. Kuidas on tagatud see haridus nendele inimestele, nendele spetsialistidele, kuidas nendel täiendharidus, täiendkoolitus ja kui palju siis see põhikoolitus või see ülikooliharidus kajastab neid vajadusi, mida te täna näete. Aitäh!
Yeah, that's also a huge question. How is the educational sector organized and structured in Norway? We have a child welfare basic education consisting of 4 years training for professionals with an emphasis also on clinical competence, not only handling the law and regulations, but also some clinical training, knowledge on effective interventions. And there are different in-service programs provided by regional competence centers, regional centers for children, youth, and youth mental health. 5 regional centers in Norway providing in-service training for child welfare workers on selected programs and competence topics. So that would be the structure of training of child welfare workers. And I know that there are some differences in the education, the basic education of social workers in Estonia and Norway when it comes to the amount of clinical training. We think that it's rather important that child welfare workers are trained both in handling the law and the regulation, but also have knowledge about clinical interventions, either to use them in a local level themselves or to serve as service brokers, to be able to send a case or to direct a child welfare case to the proper intervention, to the proper services in the system, whether that is in mental health services, in school services, or specialized child welfare services. To act as a service broker, you need information and knowledge also on clinical interventions. So, yes.
Kalle Laane, sotsiaaltöötaja. Palun, kas te selgitaksite valitsusväliste organisatsioonide rolli selles süsteemis? Näiteks nii, et kui suure osa teenustest toodavad valitsusvälised organisatsioonid? Aitäh.
When it comes to specialized services in Norway, we don't have a tradition for handling those cases in or through non-governmental organizations. The role non-governmental organizations play in Norway basically is traditionally, they have provided both foster homes, recruited and provided foster homes for children needed to be placed outside of the home, but also some institutional care, especially in the field of drug addiction and alcohol problems. As we have developed public services in Norway, the role of NGOs have been downplayed. The actual percentage of children taken care of by NGOs, I'm not sure, but it's an important aspect of the Child Welfare Act that the local government child welfare services in all cases have the responsibility for the well-being of the child. Whether it is placed in a municipal service, an NGO, or a state-level service. The responsibility belongs to the municipality at all times. With the recent development in Norway, with an increase in cases, child welfare cases, on an average level of 7%, we have not had the capacity to serve all children in need of placement out of home in public foster homes or public institutions. So over the last years, the percentage of the number of children placed in NGO recruited foster homes or institutions have increased somewhat. But I'm not sure about the exact number. What I can say that is in Norway there are at any time approximately 1,100 children and youth living in an institution. 50% of those children live in institutions that are run by private or idealistic organizations in Norway. Yeah.
Ja Jaanes Näit, MTÜ Igale lapsele pere, te mainisite, et Norras 80% riskilastest ja noortest saavad toetust oma kodus. Äkki tooksite mõne näite?
There are many different kind of measures, interventions in families. Some of them are compensatory measures. It could be assistance to place a child in a kindergarten, not have to pay for it. You could have a support home that could take care of your child every other weekend, for instance. You can have economical support in the family. These decisions are made by child welfare services. Based upon the needs of the child for support to positive development, positive parenting programs where the parents engage in training for developing the skills to handle their child in a better way and to increase the quality of the interplay between the child and the parents. That could also be a measure released in a family. Most of the interventions or most of the measures released in the families are compensatory measures released by child welfare services, like support to kindergarten, economical support, relief services. So there's a distinction between compensatory interventions and measures and interventions where the objective is to support the development of the child through the interaction with the parents and the environment around the child.
Tiia Lester, MTÜ Ellu. Palun, kas te räägiksite sellest, kuidas on Norras korraldatud üksikvanemate toetamine ja nende perede laste aitamine? Kes sellest vastutab, kes seda organiseerib ja missuguseid meetmeid või teenuseid kasutatakse? Aitäh!
Well, I don't think that there are that many particular interventions directed or responsibilities placed in services directed towards single parents. They receive assistance in the family, released on the same basis as other parents, where the main thing releasing these measures are the needs of the child and not the status for the parents. So, but there are a lot of single parents that they are overrepresented in child welfare statistics. There are some programs directed towards single parents with children with special needs, for instance, disabilities, learning problems, and so forth.
Aitäh huvitava ettekande eest. Võib-olla sa annaksid veidi infot sellest, kuidas teil toimub erinevate sektoritega koostöö reaalselt, haridus, õiguskaitse, laste hoolekanne, et millised on need formaalsed struktuurid ühiseks koostööks ja sektorite integratsiooniks ja millised on need mitteformaalsed viisid, kuidas te koostööd teete?
Well, there are a lot of different structures, and they develop both on local level and on state level, interacting based upon personal relations. But on a formal structures, I mentioned some of the national strategies emphasizing organizational, structural cooperation, coordinative measures between different sectors, as for instance the family huset and the barnehuset. It's an organization on local level where you localize in the same building different kind of services to attend a broader the needs of the child in a broader sense. So you integrate child welfare services, family counseling services, educative services, working together to assess, identify and meet children's needs within the same structure. There are a lot of many different organizational structures developed over the years, and some of them you will hear more about in the workshops afterwards.
I'm Freja Ylvästäkärki from the Norwegian Directorate of Health and a collaboration partner in another program, which is the gender-based domestic violence. And I would very much like to add to what you just said, if it's okay. Sure. Because the structures for collaboration are very much addressed during the last years in Norway. On the policy level, there have been several initiatives. For example, in 2005 to 2009, there was an interministerial collaboration resulting in a policy document which was addressing the children and youth who were exposed to domestic or sexual violence outside the family. And there is also a new policy document in making, which is a collaboration document between different ministries. And in 1998 to 2008, there was a mental health reform in Norway. And as a part of that, there was an own policy document for children and youth. And that was also a policy document that was a result of a collaboration between the ministries. And for the time being, there is a brand new strategy document for children and youth. And it is also kind of something that the ministries are collaborating. And one thing that is especially interesting in this context is that there is an implementation ongoing on a national level for families to identify potential violence in intimate partner relationship. And this is a collaboration between the Directorate of Children, Youth and Families, which you know very well, and the Directorate of Health. So because you have such a very good participation in this seminar, I would also like to advertise for our program and also to ask you to think what are the possibilities for you to collaborate with our program. I hope I didn't do anything that you wouldn't approve, Paul, now. Thank you.
Kuivõrd mitu korda on siin nimetatud sellise juhtliinina seda laste huvisid, siis minu küsimus puudutab seda, et kui palju tähelepanu te pöörate lapse huvide määratlemisele ja kas te kasutate ka seaduses olevaid legaaldefinitsioone selle jaoks? Aitäh!
Over the last year, this has been addressed rather vastly in Norway, both on policy level, on competence building, on both being able to understand, to talk to a child, to understand what a child is communicating, and to act on the children's own perspectives and needs. So on policy level, in the new Child Welfare Act, there's a principle on involvement of the child emphasized. One of the measures is that any child in contact with child welfare services have the right to appoint a person of trust to assist the child in the meeting with child welfare services and in the way through different kind of interventions. So this will support the children's feeling of security and have somebody that will assist them in all throughout the child welfare case. This is one of the measures taken in the Child Welfare Act. Another action is the establishment of a national survey as of 2011, where we ask by questionnaires all children above the age of 9 years old living in foster homes, state foster homes, or institutions. How do they feel about the situation, the life situation they are in? Do they feel secure? Do they know what is going to happen next? Do they attend school? Do they have leisure time activities that meet their own wants? So, and we use this systematic information and feedback from the children themselves in developing services further in Norway. So I think also we have established a user strategy involving different organizations representing children who have been in contact with child welfare services in developing competence plans, strategies, and service development. So I think this is one of the things we have been more successful in over the last 2 or 3 years than other aspects within child welfare development.
Nii, nüüd ma annan ühe viimase küsimuse võimaluse sinna prouale.
Aitäh! Maire Reest ja Kaagvere erikool. Et oma ettekandes te mainisite, et 50% noortest õigusrikkujatest on vaimse tervise probleemidega. Kas Norras on hinnatud noorte õigusrikkujate puhul erinevate sekkumisviiside ja programmide nii lühiajalist kui ka pikaajalist kuluefektiivsust? Ja kui on, siis millised on need näitajad? Aitäh!
Well, I do realize as I stand here that we should get some questions up front so I could have the statistics or actual numbers for what you're asking, because I don't have those at hand right here. But what we know from international research on juvenile offenders is that 60 to 70% of those have one or more severe mental health problems meeting diagnosed level. 60 to 70% of juvenile offenders. This is common in Western countries. The rate of mental health problems among this particular group. As for interventions and effect, what we have been doing lately in Norway is focusing, except from prevention programs on local level, crime prevention and in-family assistance, for instance, multisystemic therapy. It's a treatment model where one of the inclusion criteria is conflict with the law. We implemented that program in 1999, and we have several positive results from the intervention in the family for this group, preventing institutionalization on a later stage. We also started or changed the policy 5, 6, 7 years ago on alternative reactions to imprisonment or traditional punishment for this group in Norway, establishing mediation boards where you have an alternative structure than the court system, where the court can transfer a case where a juvenile have committed a crime to a mediation board, mediating the situation between the victim and the offender and trying to make a plan for rehabilitation outside the traditional penalty system. We have also very good results from the use of mediation boards in Norway. When this was piloted, Ministry of Justice in Norway said that there was a 70% reducement in re-omitting crimes for this group going through mediation services as compared to those met with traditional punishment. So we are developing the system for mediation boards in Norway based upon the preliminary results. When it comes to treatment, rehabilitation and treatment for this group in institutions, as I said, most of these youth are under the responsibility of child welfare services. We started developing an evidence base, a new model for institutional treatment for youth with serious behavioral problems in conflict with the law. This is called Multifunk. It was established in all 5 regions in Norway in 2005. We are conducting research on the results, the effect study of this. Now it will be concluded at the end of 2015. Preliminary results are good on goal achievement for those kids, and we see that there is a reducement in institutionalization for the group that has went through a multifunk model. This is, I think, the main interventions for this group in Norway and the direction for handling them.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we do not have more time for questions now, so thank you, and we will move on.